good. Thank you. I'm a real pleasure to be with you all today. I wanted to sort of follow on from what Anna was talking about, to talk about what COVID-19 might mean for environmental security. And I guess it's a real I told you so moment where for years the environmental security movement has been jumping up and down, often outside the room, saying, look, you really need to think about environmental security, you need to think about environmental integrity, and if you don't, it has very real implications for people around the world. And so, you know, mostly we've been ignored, and now COVID-19 has demonstrated tremendously powerfully that environmental health in one place has security impacts elsewhere. But just jumping up and down and saying, I told you so, doesn't make you very popular. So it doesn't really help much. But I see out of the COVID-19 epidemic, I guess, three reasons for optimism, if we can try and find some silver linings in this cloud. I mean, the first is that it shows that individual action has enormous consequences. Indeed, it's only through the individual action that we're taking that we have any chance of addressing COVID-19 without a vaccine, without a treatment. So individual action is where it happens. If ever anybody thought that what I do doesn't matter, surely that argument has changed now. Secondly, I think this has to change the way that people, businesses, governments think about risk, how they plan for it, how they prepare for it, how they invest in it. And thirdly, it shows us the importance, as Anna was saying, of prevention, of resilience, and critically of early action. It was only those countries that took early action in terms of lockdowns that avoided the worst impacts. And so if you have early action, it's just demonstrated so powerfully that moving earlier is much more effective than moving later. So those, I think, are some of the things we have to take out of this and take forward in the kind of environmental security movement. But I guess there are some real risks here as well, for security in general and environmental security in particular. I think that over the short term, the scope for accidental or engineered misunderstandings among the great powers as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic is really quite frightening. Also for non-state actors, for would-be terrorists, for countries that are you know, are willing to go towards this. This is a very powerful example of the potential impact of biological weapons. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was quite a lot more thought going into both the creation and ways to reduce the impact of biological weapons. You know, in terms of sort of copycat events and so on. But over the long term, I guess, time will tell what kind of political echoes this whole event has. We can already see some things that are happening in terms of the great power relationships between US and China, the position of individual governments, ethnic relationships at a country level. But these things play out over decades. And I think this is really important for both environmental protection and for security. If we look back, you know, back to the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, that had political ramifications way beyond what I think any of us ever thought about at first in the middle of that crisis. I think we can draw a fairly direct line from the financial crisis in 2007 to Brexit in 2016 to Trump to a whole range of other things. And I guess this leads me on to my next point, which is the impact of COVID-19 on global cooperation. As Anna was talking about, global cooperation for environmental protection, but also for security collaboration. Already before COVID-19, we've seen this unraveling of the system of multilateralism, of interdependence, of working together to address shared challenges. And this is a web of interdependence we've spent 75 years developing. When you think about what came out of the Second World War, it was the UN, it was the Bretton Woods institutions, it was the welfare state. It was all of these different things that came out of that, as well as decolonization, and an entirely new world that developed out of it. And for the last 10, 15 years even, we've seen that web of collaboration slowly starting to sort of disentangle. And so I really worry that this is going to accelerate that. I think so many of us who live in these sort of internationalist world of conferences and discussions of these issues live in these bubbles of assumed values, that we assume that everybody agrees with us that working together to fix shared challenges is the way we have to work. And that's unfortunately not the case. And I think one of the long-term political ramifications of the COVID-19 epidemic might be to accelerate that. Somehow, I don't understand this, but somehow being a globalist has become an insult, with the implication that that's something counter to a national agenda. And if COVID does anything to us, it should show us that you have to think globally if you want to look after your own people. But again, we can see how messages can be twisted and how people can take different things from this. So I really worry about what this means for the multilateral system. I think it's been very difficult for the multilateral system to confront this, to address it, to show how it's relevant to it, because this has primarily been about national responses. So I think over the long term, I think what we should all think about is how can we redouble our efforts to make sure that global cooperation, global collaboration continues, and that we don't lose this sort of multilateralist approach of working together to confront shared challenges as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic. So I think that's not a particularly positive note to end on, but I think it's one of the big challenges we have ahead of us. Thank you.